I wasn't expecting that introduction. Very kind. Who wrote that? You check me out. It's been such a great day. It's been so enriching. I have had the pleasure of working with Everything in Sport Women's Editions since the beginning, 2019, so 6 years it's been. Each year the conference gets better and better. I've had the honour of chairing the advisory board this year, and I can assure you that so much thought has gone into ensuring that we've had depth of topics, diversity of speakers. After this, we're going to have networking drinks. Hang around for them. I can honestly tell you I have made some really wonderful friendships, connections, and good business from these conferences, so please do stick around. It's been a long day, and each one of you have come in your professional capacity to take away some learnings. I'm going to ask you for the next 15 to 20 minutes, oh, there is literally a timer on there, for the next 18 minutes and a bit to sit in a more personal capacity. Yes, take away learnings, but just use the next few moments for a bit of self-reflection. Right, I'm going to ask someone to put up their hand and tell me what the similarities are between these two photos. And bear in mind, if you don't put up your hand, I'm gonna point. Dave, what's the similarity between these two photos?
Both you.
They're both me. I look the same age. James? I'm smiling. Okay. Can someone tell me the difference between those two photos? My eyes are different. Maybe I'm enriched, lying down. One has a baby, one doesn't. 2016. In that photo, I have post-traumatic stress disorder from nearly having lost my daughter on the second day of giving birth to subsequently enduring and experiencing a lot of hospital visits and long-term stays, having health conditions. I had postnatal depression, I had PTSD, I had anxiety, which evolved into other depression. I didn't know. 2025, a person who has processed that deep trauma, and actually that moment triggered a deeper childhood trauma. Self-awareness, education on what mental health is, and coping mechanisms. Welcome to my talk, The Unseen Battles, the mental game behind the physical one. Two very different environments. Trading floor of an investment bank, a running track. On the left, we're suited and booted, indoors, no fresh air, analysing financial data. How can those two environments actually strike very, very clear, similar parallels? With both, it's about performance, and performance with very clear metrics. Fierce competition, highly pressurised environments, and a culture of winning at all costs. And neither of those environments nurture any natural vulnerability. And on the left, that's where I worked for 12 years before doing what I do now. So when I returned back to work after maternity leave, bearing in mind that photo you just saw and that unseen battle, not one person noticed a red flag in my well-being. The pressure to perform was higher than ever given my absence. And despite working for one of the world's largest global investment banks, I had no idea what support was available to me. So what was the consequence of inaction? The lack of investment into my personal journey effectively affected my performance journey. And that's the thing when it comes to mental health. We have to understand its importance as an investment into the human capital project. So that's an investment into the knowledge, the skills, and the health of people so they can realise their potential and translate that into productivity. So on that, I'll properly introduce myself. I'm Anju Solanki. I founded a diversity, inclusion and mental wellbeing consultancy back in 2018 with a vision and mission to create equitable societies and drive social change. I work with a variety of sectors, national governing bodies, sporting organisations, corporates, charities. And I can tell you as an independent, the beauty of working with such different industries and sectors is you get to see what's working well, but you also get to see where the barriers still lie and ultimately get to a point where you can share best practice. One of the things I can tell you as a D&I consultant is that mental health and D&I are very closely connected. And that's due to the fact that underrepresented groups can face unconscious bias and other stressors that can heighten mental health risks. But what that also means is the understanding of how those two intersect as a society means that we can shape the experiences of athletes and generally people around us. Do you know, I remember years ago, even growing up, I never saw those terms anywhere. When I first started working 20 years ago, even then, at the GP, if I'm waiting for my appointment, back then when we saw the doctor in person, it wouldn't even be well-being and illness, it would just be mental health. I'd see it somewhere signposted on a notice board. When did I hear that phrase? Never. But we know that times are changing, mental health is being validated, it's being acknowledged, because there's now an understanding that mental health is at the centre of good performance. But we are working in such a multi-generational society, more now than ever before, when we look at the age demographic. So that means that we have what we call the Gen Zs, who have been exposed to conversations around mental health from as young as school age, to those who have not only not been exposed to conversations around mental health, they've had to ignore that concept in its entirety. And effectively, as you'll hear many of them say, we just get on with it. We are in different times. Children as young as my daughter, who's 9, are learning about it at school. We are going through what is an epidemic when it comes to mental health. It's been exacerbated by the pandemic. Increased demands, increased pressures, a grim economic backdrop. It's all led to a place where we cannot ignore it. But when we look at these terms, there's a really interesting term out there, which many of us might not even have heard of until recently, and that's called languishing. Languishing is a mental state where we can find it difficult to feel positive about life. There's a famous organisational psychologist called Adam Grant, who many of you might know, and he refers to languishing as almost living your life as though you're muddling through your days, looking through a windshield that's just foggy. I'm going to ask you to look at those terms and just think, can you very quickly tell me the difference between those? Mental health. It's something we all share, it's something we all have, it's a state. It's our emotional, our psychological state, our social state. It can be impacted by any experience. Our relationships, our careers, the pandemic. Mental well-being or mental wellness. That's the ability to be able to think, feel, and behave in ways that positively impact parts of our lives. Mental illness, specific diagnosable health conditions generally associated with the distress and challenges of functioning in various aspects of our life. It involves quite often emotional imbalance, changes in our thinking and our behaviour, in the same way physical illness would do the same. So if we know at the very least 1 in 6 adults in the last week have experienced symptoms of depression and anxiety, that means in this room right now, you are with some of them. So my question is, would you know who they are? Would you know what red flags to look for? Would you offer your support? Would you know how? Or is that person you? So the Active Lives survey, they monitor wellbeing and they use 4 key markers which come from what the Office of National Statistics use to monitor and understand wellbeing using effective scorecards. How happy did you feel yesterday? What would you give yourself for that? How satisfied are you with your life nowadays? To what extent do you feel that the things you do in your life are worthwhile? How anxious did you feel yesterday? Take a moment and just think about where you'd mark yourself out of 10 on each one of those. I love sport. Well, I love it because it impacts everyone. So in the D&I work I do, and we talk about representation, sport impacts everyone. It's a double-edged sword, though. Sport for all, we know, is proven to improve mental well-being and improve mental health. Be it the participation in sport, the ability to release those endorphins, have a better sleep, that social connection. So why is it when we elevate sport and we look at elite athletes, and particularly those who are female, why are they at greater risk of mental health issues than others? We're living in a society where 35% of all athletes have reported symptoms of anxiety and depression. But of that, females are double and twice as likely to report those symptoms. We've got Sophia. We had Sophia here just earlier talking about, what she's gone through when it comes to eating disorders. Up to 45% of female athletes have been displayed to show eating disorders. Just under 70% of female athletes in aesthetic sports, such as gymnastics and ballet, have experienced menstrual dysfunction, which affects their energy, and it's linked to mood disturbances. So what does this all tell us? These numbers share a deep-rooted story of social, biological, and systemic challenges that affect women in sport and still do now. We know things like the pressure to perform, public scrutiny. Elite athletes are closer than ever to spectators through social media. They feel everything. That constant uncertainty around retirement. We all have to think about retirement at some point, but we know it's most probably later on in our lives. Yet it's a constant battle for those who are in the game. But we do know that we are in an era where these athletes are speaking up We have our role models who are sharing their stories. You know, the likes of the Frank Brunos, the Dame Kelly Holmes, and many more are speaking up about their experiences and effectively tackling that stigma around mental health. But despite some of the initiatives that we are seeing, and despite the knowledge that elite athletes are more likely to experience mental health risks, we know there's more to be done. We've had Lindsay from RPA here talking about some of the amazing work that's been done there. This is just the tiniest snapshot of some of the initiatives that many sporting organisations are rolling out. Some are in its infancy, some have been around for many years, some have been kick-started by individuals, some by player associations, by national governing bodies, by clubs. So we're going in the right direction. The question is, are we going at the pace at which we're seeing the rise of those mental health cases? That's debatable. So then we have to ask ourselves, right, if people are kick-starting things with good intention, and we're going to see that being rolled out, what more can be done? What more can we do? Yes, if you're a coach, you've got a role to play. If you're a manager, if you're a club as an employer, if you're a governing body, you've always got more to do. But each and every person in this room has a role to play, and that role is in changing culture around mental health. So how do we do that? We start cultivating a culture of psychological safety. I've actually heard psychological safety mentioned in nearly every chat that we've had today. So that's the fear of being able to speak up without being penalised. Taking ownership and responsibility. But no matter what you do in the realm of sports and the capacity you come in today, how do you build up the people around you? Do you build them up by allowing them to strive for success? Or is it fearing failure? How vulnerable do you get yourself? What have you done to let others know that it's safe to speak up in your day-to-day? The one thing with sports is investment banking too. It's like the only place, if you've heard some of the coaches and the way they talk to athletes, it's the only place where I think you can do that and not necessarily get fired, you know, same with investment banking. But they're special environments, they really are. But you need to ask yourself, in the culture that you work within, is it building champions for the long term? Or is it a culture of winning, or winning at all costs? Take a moment and think about how you view emotion, be it a man or a woman. We have two sides of our brain. We have the left side, and that processes the logical, the analytical side of information, which can quite often result in something that feels more rational, something that feels more tangible. But then we have the right side of our brain, and that processes feeling. It processes emotion. Don't underestimate the power of emotion when it comes to facilitating performance. But just remember one thing as we close out. We're all human. We're not robots. We're all just human. So let's start by firstly asking ourselves how we are. How am I? How do I feel? What can I do for myself today to feel stronger and more positive than yesterday? I run a female football coaching community alongside England Football Learning. You would have heard from Sharon from the FA earlier today. I can tell you, this is just a snapshot of some of the community. The power of asking how someone is. It's like unlocking a life story and can provide more support than you can ever imagine. And in someone who works in a capacity of belonging, that's how you get people to feel like they belong. So let's start to think of others. the most powerful thing you can do is to open up that conversation. How are you? How are you really? Make it a safe space that's not fueled by judgment. Just know sometimes you might need to ask more than once to get a genuine answer, for that person to know that you're genuinely interested and that you care. We have the ability to break the stigma on mental health. We all have a footprint and an impact on people around us. So let's empower and support each other to get to a place where we can all operate from a place of mental wellness. I invite you to value the things you can't measure: kindness, empathy, humility, and vulnerability. I've shared something with you on stage as to what I experienced at one of the weakest moments, most vulnerable moments in my life. I'm going to invite you all to do the same before we close out. So I'm going to ask you a question. Have you experienced your own unseen battle? If you have, I ask you to kindly stand up. I'd like you to look around the room with the lens that I have. For what I see standing up are pillars of strength and not weakness. Remember that and remind yourself of that. Thank you so very much for having me. I would love for you to stay in touch. I will soon be, please, you may sit down as well, thank you so much. I will be launching a mental wellbeing and life coaching channel over the next couple of months to give free information for those who can't afford it and pay for it. So please do follow. I've got a QR code up there. The content will be launched in the next couple of months. But thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed today and enjoy the networking drinks. Thanks.